what
This
I have
conference
done.
will now be recorded.
Mm, I can see that there is significant lag between the time I present my screen versus when you actually see it. Mm, I'm unsharing my screen for a moment. All right, let me share my screen once again. So we had spoken about the last time we met. Uh, we looked at mm, okay, so last time when we met, we spoke about our bonus plans, we looked at our stock plans, and obviously the merit plans. So now we have configured all the three plan types for our advanced compensation, right? Now the next thing that I'll talk about is the grid configuration for grid configuration for compensation review. Okay, so what is this grid configuration? Now, this is the layout which is presented when your compensation review is actually launched, right? And this is the layout or the set of options or the set of fields which will be available to the reviewer when he performs his compensation review process, right? Okay, so what I've done is I have set up a compensation review, right? And let's go ahead and look at that. I'm logging in as uh, start proxy. So I've set up a structure, and that is what took me a bit of time. Sumara, I think that is the employee. So I'm proxying in as a manager who currently has a compensation review item in her inbox. So if I go to my inbox, it's still loading for you guys. Okay, so if I look at my inbox, you'll see that I have a compensation review item for a ZF compensation review 2020, which I launched, right? Now, if I go ahead and open this inbox item and go ahead and expand the screen, give me a second. Sorry guys. Okay, now this is a compensation. This is what a manager basically sees, right? This is the grid within which he would be performing his compensation review, right? Okay, I see. Now this grid has basically got different. So I'll speak a bit slower because I see that there is some lag between the time I actually uh, open a page and by the time it shows on your screen, right? I see that there's a gap. Okay, so this is the grid configuration that we'll talk about the first thing. Okay, now this grid configuration has different fields or different aspects. The first section, if you see this first column, which I see here, which says employee, this is basically the composite column or the composite column, right? Now, every grid that I configure would have a composite column, right? And this is where I show the most common details to identify an employee, right? You can show a maximum of 3 fields plus the photo of the worker, right? If you see here, I have displayed the worker's name, his position, and the base pay of the worker, right? Plus the photo. Obviously there's no photo for these employees, and that is why it just shows me a cloud icon, right? Okay, this is my composite column. These two are known as my individual columns, right? Again, I can display up to 2 individual columns, right? uh, okay, I can display individual columns wherein I can display different metrics or parameters. So for in these individual columns, I have displayed the performance rating of the worker, and in the next column, I'm basically displaying the warning or error messages. So for example, if I open this warning message, it says that the new base pay of the employee exceeds the maximum pay range, right? So first I have the composite column, that then I have the individual columns, and next I have something called column groups, right? So I have the summary column wherein I am showing the most important pieces of information. Okay, unlike your composite, your individual columns can be sorted, right? So for example, if let's say there are 20 workers and I want to sort them based on their performance rating or based on any of these individual columns, you'll see that there's no option. Oh, it shows me here as well. Uh, okay, probably this is a latest change, but then the idea is your composite column cannot be sorted and your individual columns can be sorted based on a specific parameter or a specific aspect. Okay, my column groups is where I include different sections, right? For example, I have included the summary section wherein I'm basically displaying the most important aspects, right? Summarizing the most important aspects. For example, I'm showing the base pay, the merit target, and a few other aspects. And then the next column group is my merit, where I'm showing all the details with respect to the merit, right? The next column I'm showing promotion, and the next column I'm showing performance, right? This is again all configurable. In this compensation review I have launched, I have tried to keep it simple, so I've not included any bonus, I've not included any stock plans, right? Okay, and finally, if I go to the extreme right, this is basically my smart panel or summary view, right? So some of the most important aspects, the highlights. So right now I am in Mugdha Liam. If you see, the moment I click on the second row, Richard Powell, it shows me the summary view with respect to the second worker, right? This is the first worker and it shows me details of the first worker, and this is the second worker, it shows me the details of this. So this is basically a smart panel. Again, some of the important aspects of worker details that you want to show here, you can go ahead and include in the smart panel, right? Okay, so what all does your grid include? Your grid configuration basically consists of 4 different sections. Okay, so your comp admins or your compensation admins, the comp admins configure uh, or the grid that then displays in the compensation review process, right? Okay, it consists of 4 different sections, and what are these? The first one is your composite column. Okay, the next thing, your composite column and your individual columns are fixed, and then the column groups is what you can basically scroll, right? Everywhere your composite and your individual columns are fixed. All right, and again the layout, your first column is always the composite column, and then you show individual columns and then column groups, and at the very end your smart panel, right? Okay, so your composite column, as I mentioned, it contains up to 3 fields and an employee photo, right? So you can display up to 3 fields on your composite column, and I've displayed name and position and the base pay or the maximum base pay and the employee photo, right? And this is always the first column. Okay, what is the next column? The next column are your individual questions. Okay, so the next columns are your individual columns, right? Okay, I think it can contain a maximum up to 4 fields, but let me quickly check on that. So right now I have configured only 2 columns. One is current performance rating and the second one is warning. But what I understand is you can configure up to uh, 4 columns or 4 individual columns apart from your composite column. But then we'll quickly verify that. So it contains up to 4 fields for compensation review grids, right? What is the next one? The next one are your column groups, right? And you can create different groups. For example, your merit column group, your bonus column groups, your stock column groups. So these basically groups show all the details specific to that group, right? And finally you have the smart panel. Again, your smart panel is optional. Excuse me. Okay, now so your smart panel is optional, and we'll see how it is configured. Okay, now how do I configure my grid configuration? So the task is create grid configuration, right? Like if I go into this task, okay, here I have, so the task is create grid configuration. Okay, now on your grid, you can copy an existing grid, right? Or you can create a blank grid as well, right? So you want to jump start with your configuration. There's already a grid available and you just want to copy it, you can go ahead and do that, right? So let's see any of the delivered grids which are available. The grid we are interested in is for your shared participation for compensation review, right? Earlier we used to have just compensation review, that is no longer being used, already retired. Okay, it says shared participation, merit, bonus and stock grid. Let me go ahead and select that. I would go ahead and give a name to our grid, and let's call it WB uh, uh, grid. Okay, now you guys are already aware of how reporting works, right? So on a report, when you go ahead and build a report, you select a primary business object. Right now, all the fields on that report are basically available from your primary business object. In a compensation review, your primary business object is basically adjustment for, right? So all your fields are available from your adjustment for, right? Okay, the first section is your composite, and you can go ahead and give a name to your composite section, right? So the way I have named it as employee, similarly you can go ahead and give a name to your composite section. right? Okay, as I mentioned, a composite section can show you up to 3 fields plus an employee photo, right? Okay, I see there's a significant lag. If you see, if I come back to the screen, I see that there are 3 fields that can be displayed, right? Plus I can display an image. All right. So in this case, this is a standard grid that I have copied, and the first field I'm displaying is the employee name. The second field that is displayed is the supervisory org, and the third field, let's say I want to display, is employee's position. Or maybe I don't want to display supervisory org because that doesn't add any value. So the second thing field I want to display is position, and the third field I want to display is location, because many a times you have location specific compensation changes. Okay, so this is my grid. Uh, this is my composite column configuration, wherein I have included 3 fields plus the image field, right? Okay, what is the next section? The next section is your individual columns, right? And let's see how many individual columns I can add. All right, so I can add 4 individual columns. So right now, if you see, the moment I have added 4, it no more gives me an option to add any other column. So if I remove it, right now I have 3 columns. If I add one more, and now there's no option to add one more column, right? Okay, now so what are the options available? Now the details that are shown here, now this is again some standard grid that I have configured. It shows me a field called previous proposal, so what was proposed for the employee earlier, right? And then let me add, let's say, performance. So next field I want to show is the performance, uh, current performance rating, right? Okay, maybe the next field I want to show is, let's see what our fields are. Maybe I want to show the potential rating of the worker. Let's search for potential from career advancement if one is okay. So I'll select this one. And final field that I want to show is the errors or warning messages, right? Now what you would have noticed is, if I look at the column type, you'll see that, and if I scroll up, the column type for previous proposal is advanced, and then I have the option. If I open this drop down, I have 3 different column types which are available. The first one is read only, the second one is editable, and the third one is advanced, right? Now, what are these column types? If I come back and open my review template once again, now all these, for example, the current performance rating, this is a column type which is read only, right? I only get to see the information which is entered, right? Warning message, it gives me to actually drill down and check additional details. Now, this is a column of type advanced, right? Similarly, if you see here, merit target, this is also a column of type advanced. So if I click here, I can go ahead and look at the details of why Workday is proposing 11% as the merit target, right? And the third one is editable. Now I want to give a merit increase to my employee. System is proposing 11%, but I want an option to change it. Similarly, the merit notes, I want to enter some comments, and this is again an editable field. So in on a grid, you can configure 3 different kinds of fields. You can configure read only, which are basically your read only. You can configure your advanced fields, merit, target, and warning, and you can configure your editable fields, right? So let's go back to our grid, and the fourth field that I want to configure is a advanced field. When I come in here and I want to configure, for example, the error messages or the warning messages, right? So I'm selecting the display me all error messages, right? So on an individual columns, you can show a maximum of 4 individual columns, and these could be your read only, your advanced, or editable. I don't think you can select editable in here. Yeah, on your individual column you cannot select editable field. If you see, the moment I select editable, it says there are no items available. So on an individual column you cannot select any field of type editable. The only field which is available is read only or advanced, right? So I've selected advanced once again, and the field I have selected is errors, right? Okay, so let's come back to our Excel. So what are the different field types that can be included? The field types that can be included are your read only, and these, as the name suggests, these cannot be edited, right? Okay, the next field types are your editable, right? Okay, this is for your managers or planners to enter their recommendations, right? For example, merit target increase that I want to recommend for this worker, right? And this is only available for your individual. This is only available for your column groups and your summary panel or your smart panel. And the final one is your advanced, right? Field types, which provides basically managers and planners additional information, right? Okay, now if I come here, I've already configured the individual columns. The next section is my column groups, right? And if you see, I can add any column groups. So at this point in time, if I go back to my grid on the employee profile, right, the column groups I have added is merit, promotion, performance, and summary, right? Okay, if I go back to the configuration, here we have the column group merit, and within that column group these are the fields that have been added, right? For example, merit increase percentage, merit target percentage, promotion increase amount, and so on and so forth, right? Similarly, there's another column group called bonus which has been added. Now this is a predefined list. If you see the options, because I've already added bonus, now these are the only options available, right? So the next column group that is available here is stock. Now I can add, remove, configure, change any of these column groups and the fields within this group. So next, promotion is already added, performance is already added. I don't need performance, I can go ahead and remove that, right? I don't want stock because in this compensation matrix, maybe stock is not even implemented in my system. I can go ahead and remove stock, right? Okay, now if I come to the extreme right, this is where I select if these fields are available on your summary panel or the smart panel. If you see, the column groups I have configured is merit, bonus, and promotion, right? These are the three column groups I have configured. If I come to the extreme right, right, and within each of these column groups I have configured a few fields. So under merit I have configured something called merit target percentage field. Now these are all workday delivered fields. right? These fields, just like on your report, if you have any workday delivered fields, you can use them. If you have any calculated fields on that business object, again you can use them, right? Again, exactly the same concept here, right? So just like on my advanced report, I'll select a field. Similarly, I select a business object. Now every time I add a new field, so if I click on this plus icon over here within, if you see in the merit column group, right, it adds a new column for me. The default business object, my primary business object, is adjustment form, but for example I can select any other business object as well. For example, I can add fields from employee or address or any other, right? So exactly the same concept as your reporting, right? I want to remove certain fields, I want to reorder certain fields, I'll just click on this plus minus. Okay, now some of these fields I want to be available on my smart panel, right? For example, let's say merit target increase, or in my summary section. If I go to the extreme right, I can select, for example, show this in smart panel and show this in summary view. So whatever fields I select to be shown in the smart panel, system would automatically include those fields in the smart panel, or it will automatically create a column group called summary and include those fields in the summary, right? So for example, this merit target percentage I want to show in the smart panel. I'll click on that. I also want this to be shown in the summary column, right? Which is the first column, this one, right? I want to show them in the summary column. So whatever columns I check that they should be shown in the summary column, Workday automatically adds them to the summary column. Whatever columns I check to be shown in the smart panel, Workday again automatically adds them to the smart panel, right? Guys, give me a second, right? Okay, now again, your grid configuration is not effective dated. So the moment I change the grid configuration, it automatically and refresh the screen, it will automatically, or the next time the manager logs in, his grid configuration would automatically get appended or updated, right? So your grid configuration is not effective dated, right? Okay, any questions on this? This is pretty straightforward, nothing uh, complex in here. Any questions? Okay, this is a different tenant, and the grid I have actually configured. So this grid which I see here, uh, let me open a new window. Right, so I'll show you how that grid, uh, how is that grid configured. So oh, so I've already created this grid, and now I want to edit it. I just have to edit the grid configuration, that is all. Right, so if I go to the task, edit grid configuration, I can edit an existing grid configuration. So I have created a grid called ZF, and if I come here, this is the grid I have configured. Oh, okay, this is the grid I have configured. So I have included employee position. I have shown his total base pay, but I don't need his total base pay. I want to, for example, show his location. Let me go ahead and make changes. I want to show the location of the worker, and here I want to add a few other fields. For example, the current performance rating is there. Let's see what else I can add. So here maybe I want to add the total base pay of the worker, right? Total base pay, uh, base oh, base pay. Okay, in the current business object is adjustment for, let me select employee, right? So I want to show his current total base pay, right? So I've selected the business object as employee, and I know that in employee there is a field called total base pay amount. So let's search for that field. Okay, so there's a field called total base pay amount which shows the annualized base pay of the worker. So I'm selecting that, right? And then I also want to show, okay, this, for example, if I go back to my screen, the title shows as warnings. Now that is because I have just relabeled that field, right? So the actual field that I have used is errors, and I have just relabeled them. So I would call it errors, error, and warnings. Okay, and this I want to relabel as current total base pay, and I want to add a new field which is total base pay. Now this I'm searching from adjustment for, it says the new total base pay. So if I go to the description, the total base pay after the changes, base pay amount annualized in preferred currency. Okay, so I'm calling it, okay, let's not relabel it, right? This is fine. So it is, so this becomes like my current total base pay, and this becomes my new total base pay. All right, and then I've added all these columns. If you see, I have added merit, and some of these columns I've selected that they should show in the smart panel, right? And some of these I've said show me the currency symbol. Some of these I'm saying show me in the summary view as well, right? And that is what gets shown in the summary view. Okay, let me remove a few of these columns. For example, I don't need this additional adjustment amount. I don't need any of these values, right? Okay, I also don't need uh, to show, for example, okay, let's keep performance and potential as is. Now, when I go ahead and save this, right, and go back to my screen and just refresh this. So this is a user Sumara who is currently performing uh, performance review, right? And the moment she opens that page once again or just refreshes it, it takes her back to her inbox. Let me expand this and let's see if the changes are effective. So now if you see, it shows me instead of the base pay, it shows me the location. It has 4 columns added. This one is relabeled as errors and warnings. This is the current total base pay of the employee, and this is the new total base pay. This is converted in the default currency, and this is the actual currency of the worker. All right. Okay, I should have actually also shown, or let me click on configure once again. Uh, let's see if I can show the currency symbol as well. So I go to the extreme right, total base pay amount, and I want to show currency symbol, and here as well I want to show currency symbol. Okay, let me refresh the screen once again. So I want to go back. All right, now if I go in here, let's see. All right, if you see, it shows me, so the dollar value of the current base pay of the worker is 166, and the new change, the proposed total after applying the merit increase is 184, which is then being converted into base pay currency to show everything in terms of GBP, right? Okay, so and then these are my individual columns. All right. Okay, we'll come back to this in a bit. First, let's talk about a few other aspects before we talk about how we launch this grid. Okay, any questions on your grid configuration? All right, so once I have configured my grid, the next thing I'll have to
Hello.
do is, yeah,
Hello.
okay. The
Hello.
next thing, yeah, hello.
Yeah, Ali.
Yes, Abhishek, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Is this same thing? For payroll and payroll integration, I have came across something called grid enabled tenant. So is this something similar to that?
I am not
Or
sure about
is
payroll because I've not worked in it, but then you have a similar grid configuration for your talent job requisition as well. So you open a job requisition wherein you see candidate details and that entire grid layout that is also configurable. So Workday uses this similar reusable framework. Similarly, you have a grid configuration for other areas. So maybe in payroll you have similar grid configuration, but I have not worked in
okay?
it. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Fine.
So you can configure similar grid, and I know that you can do it for recruitment module. Okay, the next thing, once I have configured my grid, is to define something called compensation review options. Now, what are these compensation review options? These basically allow me to define my initiation parameters, right? So whenever I launch a compensation review process, I'll have to specify a lot of initiation parameters, and instead of keep specifying it every time, I can save those parameters, and I do that using something called compensation review options, right? So these are, and then whenever I'm launching a process, I'll just select one of those initiation parameters, and then everything gets defaulted based on that, right? Of course, there's one more step, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So these are basically named sets of process uh, initiation uh, parameters, right? So these are basically a group of process initiation parameters which are named, so which means I can create multiple such compensation review options, right? Okay, so these are basically named sets of process initiation parameters for performing your compensation review, right? And then you select a set of options, right? When initiating your comp review process. Okay, again, how do you create your compensation review parameters? You do that using your, let me go back, using your create compensation review options. So the next task is, oh, this looks stuck. Mm, this is stuck. Okay, got it. I'm not saving this new grid which I just created. Okay, the next one is my compensation review options, right? And the task for doing that is create compensation review options, right? Okay, now the first thing I'll have to do is, as I mentioned, these are named set of uh, initiation parameters, right? So these set of initiation parameters, I'm going to give them a name, right? Let's say uh, uh, comp options for shared participation for GMS, or any name, or my WB uh, supervisory org. So basically, I give a name to this option, right, or these initiation parameters. Okay, what is the first option that I get? These are search reports. Now, when a manager goes to her or his grid, right, to perform compensation review, a manager is basically able to see all the employees in his grid, right? All his direct reports, and if he is a senior manager, even for your direct, indirect reports, right? Now he is able to search for these employees because of uh, these search reports which are configured. Now both of these are Workday delivered reports. Now the first report, if you see participant search report, now this is the report which allows you to search for a participant within a grid, right? And reviewer search report, this basically enables a reviewer who is performing that compensation review access to the grid and the grid configuration, right? And we'll see this is not just one level. For example, the compensation review is launched, every supervisory org would system generates an inbox item and sends to the respective manager. But let's say a given manager is not available, he's on leave for 2 weeks. Then his manager in turn would be able to view the details of this subordinate supervisory org in the absence of manager, right? These are all Workday delivered reports. So if you see default reports, this is a Workday delivered default report. Usually this is not customized. At least I have not had a need to do that. But then if you want some specified, some custom search options to be available in the way that grid looks, then you can also create a custom report, right? But then the way I've seen it, at least in none of the projects I have worked with, there was a need to create a custom search report. Okay, now the next thing that I'll have to define is the organization for which I want to perform my compensation review, right? So for example, in GMS, this is, I'll specify my top level organization, which is Global Modern Services, right? But then within that Global Modern Services, let's say, obviously, I don't want to perform compensation review for my CEO, right? That is not required. Then whatever I specify as the top level organization in that list, system would only give you compensation review options only that till that level. So even though my top level organization is, let's say, Global Modern Services, right? So this is, right? So if I look at the description here, I need to specify the top level organization of that hierarchy. And here I specify the level at till which your compensation review should be initiated, right? Obviously, there's no one to perform compensation review for your CEO, right? So usually it would be one level. So in this case, ideally I'll specify executive management group, which is one level below my Global Modern Services, right? And it shows me only those supervisory orgs which are under GMS, right? So even though there are more Global Modern Services supervisory orgs, so if I search for them separately, you'll see that I think there are at least two or three executive management group supervisory orgs, but only the one which is under this, which I have specified, will be listed out. All right. Now, if you see, when I launched my merit process, a lot of these options are pre-filled, right? So system has already automatically proposed the merit increase amount for me, and it has also proposed the merit amount for me. I have not entered any of these options. I've just launched them, right? And system automatically pre-filled based on the configuration. Now that is happening because I've said is pre-fill the merit awards or auto-fill the merit awards when the process is launched, obviously based on your compensation matrix and other factors that you have configured, right? Okay, approval limited to entire hierarchy. Now there are two options here. I can select next participant only or entire hierarchy. When I select next participant only, only the immediate next participant will be able to plan for that supervisory org, right? But when I configure entire hierarchy, basically any of my, for example, Steve Morgan, he can basically plan for any or look and view and review any of these subordinate organizations under him, even if they are not his immediate, even though they are not immediately under his supervisory org, right? And again, this is a default setting, so I think it has some description as well. Okay, so if you look at the description, it says limiting the approval to the next participant only. So that is your next participant only option, or the default setting is you can or usually you'll do it for the entire hierarchy. So that gives you the flexibility, saying that anyone can review it if a given person is not available, right? Okay, the next thing is your pools and spend. So once you launch this process, if you see there's a pool that displays here, so based on obviously the uh, the plan that you have included. So in this merit process that I have triggered, I have only included the merit plan, right? But if I have, let's say, initiated a compensation review process which has merit and bonus and stock and other plans as well, it allows me to show how those pools will show up, right? So I want, let's say, my merit plan, I want my bonus pool to be at the top, and I can move it to the top, right? Just an example. And so I want first my merit pool to show, and then my bonus pool to show, and then my stock pool to show, right? And then I don't want any of these pools to show, so I can hide them. So I don't want commissions to show, I don't want this bonus target, none of these to show up, I don't want this pools and spends to show, right? So I can hide all those budgets which I'm not interested in showing, and then I can order and rearrange. So this is your pool and spend. So your budget is basically your pool, right? Okay, and I'll not save it. So the next thing I'll do is I configure my compensation review options. Uh, all right, and once I have configured my compensation review options, the next thing I'll do is I'll configure my compensation review template, right? Excuse me. So I configure my compensation grid, I configure my compensation review options, and then I configure my compensation review template. And finally, I'll go ahead and launch my merit process, right? So the next thing I'll configure is your compensation review template. So I'll stop here. It's We are at the top of the hour. Tomorrow we'll see how you configure your compensation review template, and then we'll actually go ahead and launch a process. I've already launched it so that I could show you how this is done. But then tomorrow we'll again see right from the start. It's a simple 2 or 3 step process, and we'll see how your templates are launched, how your pools are generated. We'll go ahead and discuss that, and we'll complete our compensation process, right? Any questions?
No, Malik.
All right. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining. We'll continue with this tomorrow's class. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. You have a good day. Bye.